I'm a planner and I'm working for Politecnico di Torino for the Inter-University Department of Regional and Urban Study and Planning. So our main focus is related to the urban study, we can say, and in particular, I'm focused on global changes and how they have impact on city and territory and on the governance and resilience of this territory. Today, I will present you an Interreg program. As already you know, Interreg is one of the instruments of the European Union that support cooperation across borders. In particular, Interreg Alcotra is the European cross-border cooperation program that covers the Alpine territory between France and Italy. And the project Artaclim, the name of the project we were partner in, it was related to the second aspect of the program, so better controlled environment and resilience. Artaclim was between, as I already say, between Italy and France. Is worked on the Alpine space and the Alpine territories, and in particular on adaptation and resilience of the Alps to climate change. As maybe you know, the European Alps have been identified as one of the most vulnerable areas to climate change in Europe. The impact related to climate change have been already reported in the last decades, but they will probably have an intensification in the trend in the future. In particular, the major climate models talk about changes in terms of increasing temperatures, rainfall intensity and seasonal shift, and snow presence, elevation, and ice retreat. So just for give you some example, is some of the scenarios talk about they suppose that rainfall could be subject to a reduction by the 36% in winter, or they could also completely disappear below 500 meters. And at the same time, it's not only a problem related to the snow cover, but also to the increasing of extreme precipitation and extreme event. So today I want to, in the project we focus on different let's say aspects of climate change and the impact on biodiversity, agriculture, forest, settlement, and also on some of the main we can say the economic sector of Alps tourism. So today I just want to give you some information about tourism, and I will show you the risk assessment methodology that we have implemented about that. Because I think is an interesting way to show you how much how big are the social economic impact of climate change. So I think that most of us already know that climate change have a direct impact in terms of increasing the natural hazard, and this means desertification, ecosystem changes, but also water scarcity or forest fire. But we have territories that will have a very strong socioeconomic impact because especially in inner area, in the private area that already have a problem of depopulation, strong change in their main economic sector means also that people will start even more to leave this place, and at the same time this place will have a much more abandoned phenomena. Tourism is the key sector in Alps, and it depends on natural resources. So this is the reason, and climate, of course. And so this is the reason why this is one of the most vulnerable sector to impact of climate change. The climate change will have a consequence not only on winter tourism, but also on summer tourism. Talking about the impact on the winter tourism, we can say that usually we use the snow reliability of a ski resort that is based on the 100 days rule. This means that at the moment today, the 91% of the ski area already have this rule. But if we think about an increment of 1 degree warmer in the future, only the 75% of ski area can respect this rule. Or if we, you can see 2 degree means 61%, and 4 degrees could mean also the 30% of ski area that could be still able to have a tourism sector related to winter tourism. At the same time, even if we can think that summer tourism could be less critical or could also have a positive effect, that, for example, happen here in the area around Turin. So around the big metropolitan area, we already register new tourists during summer. Most of them are also related to climate change because people don't want to stay in the city because of the warm during summer and heat waves. So they used to spend more time in mountain. But at the same time, all the secondary impact of climate change can affect also this kind of tourism. In terms of natural hazard, we will have an increasing of landslide or flash flood, and so even the summer activities are at risk. And at the same time, so we have to consider that even if we can have a positive effect on summer tourism, the economic amount of, that generate summer tourism cannot be compensated the negative ones on winter tourism. I want to show you the methodological risk assessment that we have developed in the project for one of the area. The area is an area around Turin, is a we call homogeneous zone of Pinerolo. Is 40. It includes 45 municipality, and I think it's an interesting case because you can have in the same area high mountain, low mountain, hill, and plain area. First of all, for our methodologies, we have studied how the climate has already changed and how the impact of climate has already changed in the last 30 years. We have seen that the area that have a problem of flood risk already have an increasing of the event as well as of the forest fire, and at the same time also of the avalanche. So this is our, let's say, hub about that. You can see, I'm sorry, I know that is in Italian, but as I say, Interreg only have two languages, Italian and French. So in the first part, you can see the thematic area that we have investigate. So they include the settlement, and they are always related to one of the hazards. So flood, settlement and hazard, settlement and landslide, settlement and forest fire. Methodology is based on the idea that risk is composed of is a function of hazard, exposure, and vulnerability. In this case, hazard is related to the climate change. The exposure include, in this case, related to tourism, include all the the accommodation and ski resort or other kind of facility related to tourism, and vulnerability that include sensitivity and the adaptive capacity. These are the indicators that we have identified for our area. You have to say that for the other indicator, we have based our analysis on a downscale of the EPCC scenario model. We choose the RCP 4.5 and the RCP 8.5 scenario because usually they are the most used. And at the same time, it was not so easy to have a downscaling of it because we still have a problem of data and I mean, also they are not so so good in define possible scenario. So this is a little bit simple for what concern temperatures, but it's a little bit harder for what concern rainfall or other type of wind of other type of event. So the indicator were really relates to the possibility to have data and to use high resolution climate models. Here you can see this is just an example, and you can see two different scenarios. The scenario have a timing till the 2050, and this is the RCP 4.5, or you have a worse scenario that is the RCP 8.5 and give you information about how could change in the different municipalities. So I think this is a very important thing because we have to consider that risk is not something fixed, it's something very relative, and it depends and it changes during the time. This is, I think, the most important lesson of climate change, that we need to be more flexible also in terms of, let's say, assessment, risk assessment. So for what concerns the exposure indicator, as I already say, they include the direct impact in terms of damages affecting the tourist accommodation, the winter sports facility, or other type of infrastructure. And this one was one of the most difficult things to identify, to have data. You have to think that all these data have as a common scale the municipality scale, because it's not possible for a climate model to have a high resolution in terms of let's say urban scale at the moment, at least. And at the same time, most of our data usually are collected at the municipality scale. So this was one of the challenge of our project. And finally, the vulnerability indicators. So as I say, it included the sensitivity indicators that refer to the quantifiable physical tourism attribute, and at the same time, so they include, like, I don't know, the overnight stays, the average length of the stay, and the tourist pressure, and at the same time the adaptive capacity. So they already include climate change initiative, education, we can say, at the same time as like the sustainability initiative of the different accommodation, or also other type of, let's say, cultural activity that can work in terms of education of people, not only inhabitants but also tourists, of course. Finally, for our stakeholder, they can have different kind of information. The first one concern all the indicators that concern the hazard and the exposure and the vulnerability. And finally, we had a sort of a syntax of risk. This one, it was a little bit problematic in some way because not always they could be so good in give advice to the stakeholder. So this is the reason why we work on a scale between minus 5 and plus 5. And at the same time, I want to say that one of the things very important that we understand is that in terms of policy, it's not possible to work on climate change in terms of scale municipality, but we needed to have a larger approach that include more municipality. Because, for example, if we take into consideration, I don't know, the flood hazard, especially in an area in which we already have a problem in the settlement, we need to consider that even if one municipality decide to work on flood without the cooperation of the other neighbor municipality, this is not something very useful. I think that the climate change scenario should be taken into consideration more and more, not only in spatial planning, but also in emergency planning. And in particular, climate change should, let's say, give input to our local authorities to reflect on the possibility to have more flexible planning tools. And this is not concern only the spatial planning, but it's include also the emergency planning, but also the architecture, the building construction, and the territorial planning, I don't know, for example, related to green space. At the same time, so we need to work more on education, and we give information on population, not only on climate change impact, but and not only in terms of self-protection, but we need also to give information about the social economic consequence of climate change in our territories. Once again, I want to say how much important is to choose the right scale to analyze the different hazards, because the same hazard do not have the same risk result in different municipality, and this is mostly related to the condition of exposure, sensitivity, and adaptation capacity. And yes, of course, we need probably more and more decision support system, but at the same time, as all of you already show, we need also to understand which kind of data we need, and how much we need better data, because at the moment we have a strong lack of data. So, for example, in our risk assessment calculation, we needed to choose specific indicators, not because we thought that the indicator was the best solution, but because it was the only one for which we can have data. So, and as I say before, risk is relative. This means that we need to work on climate change also in civil protection, because climate change, as I say, is an accelerator of our hazard. So thank you for your attention.